But as I started to think through the idea of like writing a novel that had that element in it, I started to learn more about early cosmetics and early personal care in America and was like so fascinated by it. And especially knowing that I wanted this to be a queer love story, it's just such a there's so much there. It's such a rich area of like cosmetics that are such a tool of like self-expression and identity, but then also such a tool of like shame and trying to like cover up whatever about yourself is you consider undesirable or not conventionally attractive or not normal.
This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Thanks for joining us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. If you don't know, you can get all of our episodes ad-free on Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. All of Mary's True Crime episodes ad-free, video episodes ad-free from the ITBR interviews. Also, follow us on Instagram, please. Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I like to put a lot of exciting arts and culture clips from the podcast, you know, TV shows, films that we've discussed. TikTok is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story, the Ivory Tower Boiler Room one got taken off by TikTok because it was too salacious and scandalous, in my opinion. But I might be just having an Oscar Wilde complex there, thinking, that I was causing such a sensation on TikTok. So please rate us on Apple. It really, really helps. Review us. If you're on Spotify, you can rate us there too. YouTube, please follow our YouTube channel. Please like the video, share it with your friends, your community. The only way that I can keep giving you all free, exciting podcast episodes is because of the reach of the podcast. So rating us, reviewing us, it really, really does help. Also, shout out to Sean, our intern, who, if you see the cover art, you see the edits of the podcast, that's all Sean. So amazing work by Sean. So I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm so excited to be joined with a guest who I know is going to have a lot of historical fiction, nuggets of wisdom, information about New York that I'm sure I'm going to gush over. I can see the skyline from here in Jersey, right over the Lincoln Tunnel is right down the street. So I'm so happy to introduce Olivia Wolfgang Smith, who this is her second book. The first is Glassworks, which was longlisted for the Center for Fiction First Novel Prize. She is a 2024 NYFA artist in fiction from the New York Foundation for the Arts and lives in Brooklyn with her partner. So we're here to talk about her new novel called Mutual Interest, featuring a beautiful New York City building cover in nice purple glow. So welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room, Olivia.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
So I want to start maybe first with the cover because that'll get us into the history of the book, which is, as I keep looking at the cover, I know that it's like an iconic building I should know. Is this like an actual building in New York City, or is this like something that's kind of stock generated?
Yeah, it's not, nobody should know it, that there's no, it's
Okay.
not a pop quiz, but yeah, this is the American Sureties building, which is, it still stands, downtown, actually really near my partner's workplace, by Trinity Church.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
and it's very, unrecognizable now. This, illustration is from around the turn of the century. The building is still there, but it has other much taller buildings built right up against it now. So you kind of have to be, it's a little bit of like time travel tourism to go and find it. And I've had various friends and loved ones take pictures of their copy of the book like in front of the building, but
Oh,
it's really it looks very different now.
oh, okay. So it's in the FIDI, the
Yeah,
financial district.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
So the
Mhm.
oldest section of Manhattan, that makes sense.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Yeah.
and what I'm just curious about first is, what got you started or thinking about, okay, I'm really interested in an entrepreneurial, like business making in the American capitalist system right after the Gilded Age period?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are a couple of answers to it. In general, including as a reader of fiction, I really love novels about people with jobs. I like novels about work and about like collaboration. I guess it can be artistic. It doesn't have to be like a business partnership, but I find that really interesting. I feel like that's an interesting type of relationship to read about, people trying to work together, whatever that may mean. So like my first book is also about work and like the way that, like people's careers and artistic ambitions and like trying to have trying to have personal relationships that are also business relationships. Um, and I've also always loved like novels of manners, which this book kind of is. It's like the like a I've been calling it a queer Edith Wharton pastiche. That's like my really shorthand for it if I have to like really describe it in as few words as possible. And what's so fascinating about those like drawing room kind of like love stories, which I grew up loving reading, and still love reading whenever I find them, is that like what people do all day is a little bit mysterious sometimes. Like what they're like, very few people have in a lot of those books have jobs, or if they have a lot of money, which they often do, it's often kind of confusing where that money comes from to the reader, to me at least. Um, so once I knew that I wanted to write a story like that, like a kind of drawing room novel of manners, I was like, I want it to be about how these people make money. I want it to be in part about their job. So that was the start.
Well, Edith Wharton is incredible.
Yes.
I remember during the pandemic, I made it to Lenox and went to the Mount and like
Oh,
saw the,
amazing.
yeah, just her Manor's house and thinking of, you know, where she was coming up with these narratives. So I always say too, like that's actually how I've been describing your book. So I'm glad I'm not off base. Is it's like a queer Edith Wharton rendering, um, much more like making more of a political or gendered statement about
Hmm.
society. Where like I feel the House of Mirth, which is probably my favorite, Edith
Incredible.
Wharton. Yeah,
Yeah.
is just Lily Bart. For everyone who hasn't read it, Lily Bart is wasting away as like she's losing her inheritance. She just keeps like, every time she
Yeah.
tries to hit the ball, she just is failing and doesn't really want to do anything. Like talk about leisure class. Even though she
Yeah.
could do a job, she just doesn't want to get involved. And she's
Yeah.
just very passive in everything. Um,
Yeah.
but like,
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking that there are some ways where there's a lot of like Lily Bart DNA in Vivian, the central
Yeah.
kind of figure of mutual interest in some ways, but without that passivity and where she hits the ball sometimes, right? When she swings, but
Yes.
that trait that I actually stole directly from Lily Bart, which was the thing of this trait of like Vivian could get a job, like a typical like kind of like low status job. Like I think that Lily Bart at one point like works like putting ribbons on hats in like a
Yeah.
milliner's factory for like a day. But that feeling of like, well, I'm not gonna do that. Like I would rather like be destitute than do this like regular workday job that thousands and millions of people do. So yeah, they have some traits in common, those two.
Well, and something where I feel I love that you're continuing this tradition because something I've always found fascinating is how much Edith Wharton was inspired by like other writers like Kate Chopin and The Awakening and like these very psychologically dense The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, like women who are driven to the point of being so unhappy psychologically that they like have to take the matters into their own hands, where they're like all they really wanted was agency and just purpose in their life, and they're just not getting it. But like, what I think is so interesting, where Edith Wharton, she never really ties everything up, like everything kind of just society wastes away Lily, and like there's so much where the narrative could have gone but it just kind of ends abruptly. And I feel like you really pick up on, well, what if it's not an old money family, what if it's actually a woman who is so eager to start a business? Like, what's going to happen
Hmm.
in a society where there's like a up by your bootstraps type of narrative? Like, not
Sure.
someone from the elite society who then falls down. How about if it's the opposite trajectory? Like, let's go from someone from upstate New York, Utica, like Vivian, who then wants
Hmm.
to make it in New York City. And I just love that, like, the way that you start that narrative. And I'm kind of curious, like, does this come from, you know, the personal is political in a way, but the personal is the biographical is part of fiction? Like, is there anything
Yeah.
in your own upbringing that kind of connects to Vivian?
Yeah, I've never been a puppet master of a industrialist empire, but I think that one element of this book is that it's about New York City and living in New York City, but I think that it is kind of specifically about the emotional and psychological experience of being a transplant in the city,
Mm.
which like that is one thing I didn't steal from Edith Wharton. She's very, of the city and of the upper echelons in every way. But so that feeling of being like new in town and being kind of like a bumpkin who's kind of dazzled, but then has this kind of like Gatsby-ish reaction to it and is like, I'm gonna that the trope of like reinvention in the city is something that there might be a certain like very heightened, exaggerated, like emotional autobiography there to the feeling of I lived in New York for I think 11 years now, so I'm in the like the middle phase of like trying to understand what it means to live here and what's like what the city makes possible. So that's definitely one like heightened sense of what's going on in this book.
Yeah. I mean, are you from like a country type
Yes,
of
I'm
upbringing?
yeah, I grew up in a very rural area. And then Utica, where Vivian is from, is where I went to college. So it got thrown under the bus because I needed a place that I knew well enough to describe it, where I could feel, uh, yeah, I've had a number of people that I know from that part of my life and that part of the world reach out to me and say, why is this book so mean to Utica? What do you have against it? But it's just not right for Vivian. It's a great place.
Yes, yes. And okay, so like something that is just so interesting, I always love asking writers is like where when you're sitting down putting pen, well, used to put pen to paper, maybe you still do. There's still some writers who write it all out. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
good luck with them and their timelines. But you know, where when you were thinking of, okay, where to begin with this narrative? Did you turn to any other writers? I mean, we've talked about Edith Wharton, but like that seems
Hmm.
more genre based. Like, did you turn to any writers who you just are really fascinated with by their own prose style?
Yeah, definitely. I think because of the historical setting for this, there was a lot that was like I was reading in the period or about the period. So some of I was reading things that had been written around the turn of the century, including Morris E.M. Forster's book was really important
Mm.
to this book at many phases. Um, but I'm very there are all kinds of like really fascinating like maximalist like people who are writing historical fiction now, but then also this book has a really high omniscient intrusive narrator and a really wide scope in terms of like what the narrator knows and what's going on, like what the book is aware of, I guess, that the characters aren't. So there's a lot of really fascinating work being done at that level today. And I don't know if you've read Karen Joy Fowler's latest book, Booth, which is about like
Mm.
John Wilkes Booth's family, and it's like it's multi-point of view of all of his like various brothers and sisters who are like coming to
Oh.
terms with the fact that this is their sibling, and it's got similar like it came up for me a lot as I was early drafting to have like this kind of like very maximalist modern informed
Mhm.
view of a very historical story. And then the other writer that I think of a lot whenever I'm drafting anything is Elizabeth McCracken, both because she works historically and very imaginatively and inventively in that way, in a way that I'm always like aspiring to, but also all of her writing and her characters are so physically embodied, if that makes sense. Like I'm always like I can always she's so great at making sure that all of her characters, you can always visualize them in the room, exactly what they're doing and exactly how they're interacting with each other. It kind of feels like you're watching a play almost. There's a physicality to it in a way that I think is really easy to lose with historical fiction, because we're in a very removed time. So if you're writing about something that's happening in 1904, it's really easy for it to become like talking like a radio play almost, because it's hard to picture the world, certain facets of the world. So I try to think of her, and if I feel like I'm losing the realism in what I'm drafting, I'll often go back and read something of hers, to see how she does it.
Yeah, I just interviewed Renee Rosen, who wrote Let's Call Her Barbie, and we kind of got into a discussion about Ruth Handler. It's all about Ruth Handler and like how she
Hmm.
becomes part of Mattel and like pitches to them the
Amazing.
Barbie doll. And it's like that's similar. I just feel like what you've described, Olivia, is so true. I always tell my literature students every book has an aesthetic, every book has a personality, every the language in a book really, becomes part of your mental psyche. And I think
Hmm.
that like what I love of what you do and mutual interests is it's so exciting to wrap yourself around this book because it reminds me of when I first gained a love for Victorian literature. And I feel like when you do turn to certain genres, they just demand a different type of I, like an I, or if you're listening, like you can hear it in this cadences of the speech. Like
Hmm.
reading Middlemarch by George Eliot is very different than reading a Stephen King novel. Like both you appreciate, well, maybe someone appreciates, I hope they
Hmm.
appreciate Middlemarch, but
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like there is some type of way that you just adopt whatever creation this person has put forward for you on the page. And I feel like there's a time before social media writing and a time after social media writing. And like, how did you even navigate that? Because writing historical fiction, early 1900s,
Hmm.
and trying to like separate technology from the page is probably not easy to do, I imagine.
Welcome to Severed, a podcast suite dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed True Crime and Severed Paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I've found that it's a little bit easier something this removed, where we're like 100 years ago. Like it's easier because it's so different that you have to think about it from the very beginning. Like every step of the way, you have to be thinking about like the technological world that these characters are in and like what defines it. And so it kind of, I don't want to say it's effortless, like but it takes care of itself in that if you didn't want to do it, you wouldn't be writing this book. Like so
Mhm.
for like then these characters have technology that they're using. It's just, it's the first day of the subway, or it's the like it's a very different type of technology. Although honestly, some of the MTA trains seem like they have been around the entire time, I guess. But I
Yeah.
think like it's harder for me when I write things, which I have done, like write things that are set in like the 80s or 90s, which are it's a time frame that I'm familiar I'm theoretically much more familiar with. I lived through it. But it's harder because it's harder to go back and remember like, oh right, that's how the credit card swiping would have worked. It was a little different then than it is now, as opposed to like I need to learn how a telephone worked in 1915. Like, I know I don't know. I know I need to look this up.
Yeah, well, when I'm not interested in historical fiction, I'm a horror fanatic. So
Hmm.
I'm assuming you've seen Scream, but I always like to
Yes, it's been a
ask.
really long
Okay.
time.
Okay, well, something like even with Scream in the 90s and Randy works at a video store, right? He's like the one
Yeah.
who kind of knows everything about every genre
Yeah,
and he's
yeah.
like in on the horror genre. And like even just remembering what it was like in the 90s, like into the early 2000s, going into Blockbuster or your video store and like the staff knew about every genre. Like I recently went to see some horror film. Oh, the new Final Destination. And I asked like one of the Regal staff, I was
Hmm.
like, oh, what did you hear about this film? Like, is it something that we're going to enjoy? And he's like, oh, I don't watch any of the movies that come out. And I'm like, huh, that's interesting. Cause like, I don't know. I guess I still, Olivia, am living in that like blockbuster mindset of like someone who's
Mm.
in that profession is invested in their craft. But that's not the
Yeah.
case anymore. Like things are shared on TikTok. The young generation, if they're
Mm.
not interested in the short clip, they're not even going to invest their time in it. And it's like there was a time where you got lost in art. Like you got lost in a
Yeah.
book, you got lost in a museum. And I feel like we're losing a lot of those spaces of just being okay, being lost in our creative thoughts. And like that's
Yeah.
why I love what you're doing here because you're able to just remember, oh, the invention of the subway. Or I think of Bram Stoker's Dracula and how much he like pays attention to Mina learning the timetables of the trains. And she's like, you could take the train from here to here and this time and here. And it's like that was such an invention for
Hmm.
them. And it's like
Yeah.
now, what's going on? I mean, now it's like everything just feels very, very quick paced, in my
Mm.
opinion.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And there's something about like the delivery technology too that changes a sense of like browsing and discovery is a little bit different. Like there is like I don't know, scrolling on social media, there is an element of browsing, like you, but it's very different. So that is a kind of a fascinating like the shape of how we learn things and how we like follow different kind of rabbit holes is very different. In depending where we're doing it, like and in a library or in an archive or any kind of like research like that versus when something that's more mediated online is really different.
Yeah, like even though I love the way that social media, I can share out the podcast or I can like
Yeah.
connect to writers like you, there's also like moments where I think back to the early 2000s. I mean, like that's my really where my coming of age is, but
Hmm.
is like, oh, we kind of had cell phones, but it wasn't our whole life, personality and
Hmm.
identity. Like
Hmm.
we still had spaces where, library browsing was key. Bookstores were like part of your everyday, maybe not everyday conversation. Again, I'm coming from like the bookworm mindset. So,
Yeah.
even what
Yeah,
I'm
no, for
seeing on
sure.
social media is different, but, you
Yeah.
know, like I imagine that would be hard. Like if you asked me to write a story in 2000 and like think about the technology, it's like, wait, that's right. We still had to type on our phone. We weren't really like even having unlimited messaging plans. So
Yeah.
it seems like it's more of a difficult process to like
Hmm.
think through that. I don't know. I always say that even about um doing academic research or writing is sometimes
Sure.
doing contemporary research is harder than looking into the past, which is why I like looking into the 19th century. But okay.
Yeah.
So another passion of mine is something that your novel does so well, and I can't wait for more to get their hands on your book because like thinking of what Vivian is going to latch herself onto, like how she discovers that like the soap
Hmm.
industry, is actually like the whole beauty industry is going
Yeah.
to be part of her DNA. Like, what was it for you that, okay, I need to make sure that she has some kind of entrepreneurial mission. Let's go into the bath and body type, uh,
Yeah.
arena. Like, how did that occur for you?
There were a couple of different origins for that. The fact that yeah, the business venture that the book is about is the personal care industry
Mm.
that like yeah, soap, cosmetics, perfume, and then scented candles, which I kind of like bring in. But so one seed of that is historical the origin of Procter and Gamble as a company is was like a little bit I definitely did steal it, but I took such huge liberties with it that it is like it's almost more of an insult to them to say it's historically
Mm-hmm.
derived. But that this was William Procter and James Gamble, Procter and Gamble, started as business rivals before they became partners. One of them was a soap maker and one of them was a candle maker, and they had the common raw ingredients of their industries that they were fighting over until they married into the same family. And then their father-in-law was like, you guys are idiots. You should be working together, not fighting. Um, I learned that that was happening in Cincinnati. I was born in Cincinnati, so I was like intrigued by it as Cincinnati lore. And I was like, that's incredible. That's like a truth stranger than fiction kind of situation. It's such like a tropey story of like starting out as rivals and ending up partners. And then I was just frustrated because I was like, I want it to be a love story. I want it to be these two. I want it to be more dramatic. It's like one step in the direction I want it to go in. So that was the very beginning of why that industry, why personal care, because of that historical nugget. But as I started to think through the idea of like writing a novel that had that element in it, I started to learn more about early cosmetics and early personal care in America and was like so fascinated by it. And especially knowing that I wanted this to be a queer love story, it's just such a uh there's so much there. It's such a rich area of like cosmetics are such a tool of like self-expression and identity, but then also such a tool of like shame and trying to like cover up whatever about yourself is you consider undesirable or not conventionally attractive or not normal. Um and that like kind of dichotomy was like really interesting to me, and it's just like a fascinating, it's so tied up in the history of America. Like Procter and Gamble's big break was that they got the contract to supply the Union Army with soap in the Civil War. Like that was like where they like took off. And that was really fascinating. I moved everything around so much. I said it like almost a century later. So that's why I have in the book their company's big break is that they get the contract with the New York subway system to like supply all of their restrooms, which is not really the same thing as the Union Army, but that's what I went with. So that's a long answer, but that I knew it had to be some kind of industry that existed at the turn of the century in a big way, but that was kind of dynamic enough that it could be manipulated, and that someone like Vivian could kind of put her own personal spin on it, and as well as Squire and Oscar, the two other central characters. So it ended up feeling like a good fit as I went on.
Well, and I love it because I feel like there is something so, I want to say, queer about the soap personal care industry. I
Hmm.
mean, I've always been curious, like, what is the difference between personal care and like a beauty industry? Because I feel like there is some differences, right? Or the spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. Book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of The Sleeping Beauty, one on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made it French there, with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine. Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have two exciting guests coming on soon. and I've recorded their episodes, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tucholsky, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my Writing 2 course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does. And we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student-friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading.
Yeah, it's a really good question. When I first started drafting this book, I thought that personal care as a term was like antiquated. I was like, it's so funny that we used to call beauty personal care, but then it's everywhere. Every Duane Reade in the city has a personal care aisle. It still is like very much in use. So I think that it's kind of one of those things that it's a little bit depends who you're asking and who's trying to describe it. But I think that you actually hit on a really interesting question. This is another thing that's fascinating about it, is that like there's a hygiene component that's very necessary, right? Like providing soap for soldiers in an army is like, that's not cosmetics. That's really important. More people, especially in the Civil War, like died of infection than of like wounds from battle. But at the same time, obviously, cosmetics are some of the most luxurious non-necessities that exist at the same time. And that's actually an element that's one of the things I really liked about it, is that line is really unclear. It is kind of a marketing decision whether you want to position any products that are made in this industry as like necessary or luxury is sort of up to you, and up to like how you want to sell it, and up to who you can convince, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, I have a friend who when I was living on Long Island in a town called Port Jefferson, it's like right on the Long Island Sound, very like lots of boutiques, great summer place actually. And I'm gonna see her soon, so I can't wait. I'm gonna like make sure I either bring your book or like, your episode hopefully will about to be coming out. And her store that she co-owns with her mom is called the Soapbox.
Amazing.
And yeah, and it's like kind of what you've talked about. Like what I love is how much they curate their products, and they're so invested. And it's like there's the men's fragrance section, there's, the French soaps, the Italian soaps, the shower aromatherapy, the bath bombs,
Amazing.
the farmhouse fresh, like the retinol products. And it's like, you're right. Like at the heart of it, there's the hygiene, but then who's telling you that you need to throw a bath bomb full of pink dye into your bathtub? But then it becomes more of the self-care routine, and like they sell slippers, so it's like there is a whole aesthetic there. And I think that it's just so fascinating to kind of peel that history and layers back, because I feel like now we have those conglomerates. Of course we have like their corporate rival, the Bath and Body.
Hmm.
And their fragrances just keep, in my opinion, keep getting out of hand with their scents. Like they can't just have lemon. It has to be like lemon honey cake almond croissant. And it's like, whatever. We don't know what that means. But all jokes aside, they have some good
Hmm.
products. And like, I'm just curious, are you a fan? Like, are you a lover, I'm assuming, of these, you know, any type of personal care or this luxuriousness in the industry?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I am, and I notice it more now, having read having written this book. I like feel like I have like new eyes to see as I move through the world, and I like notice more about it. Both when things are really charming to me and when they're, a little ham-fisted in that way that you're describing. I like when the scents get really abstract, when it's something that like doesn't have a scent, so, like it doesn't conjure a scent in my mind at all. But I think part of it is that the idea of like cosmetics and personal care, and especially scent. I don't have a great palette. Vivian is the character who has my palette in this book, where she can't really tell the difference between different like subtle differences in scents. She just kind of trusts. She's like, whatever, that's your guys' department. Um, and I kind of hoped that I've always like there are certain things that I associate like with my grandmother having like a signature scent or having like a signature lip color. Like there are like certain things that I've sort of always wished for but don't have the confidence to identify for myself, like what that would be for me. And I think that I hoped writing this book would like bring me to that place where I would like putting myself in the minds of these characters who like know so much about this industry might help me figure that out. But I'm still on my journey on that. I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah, but you're right. Like for me, I don't do cologne a lot, but like if I do, it's um Armani or Ralph Lauren. And it's
I
like,
love
right,
it.
I can recognize it by the bottle. I'm like, okay, the
Yeah.
Ralph Lauren is a little black bottle. The Armani, you know,
Hmm.
is Acqua di Gio. That one I remember by name. But
Hmm.
it's right. Like, and once you say the name, sometimes you can just smell. It just
Hmm.
envelops you. And I think that, now though, I have sugar scrubs. I have like I'm addicted, Olivia. Like
Yeah.
I'm
No, it's
addicted
great.
to like all these different products.
There's so much to love. And that's why I was interested. We think of that as so modern, like, or I do at least. I always like have thought of that as like I guess it's just because it's not something I feel like going back recently to like my parents' generation or their parents' generation, it feels like they were like decreasingly concerned with like this kind of a field. But it was interesting to me to research and to write and like just to remember that this isn't a new field, like this isn't a new industry. And it made me feel kind of connected to the turn of the 20th century and people who were living then in this new way, to be like they were inventing new soap, like they like that was like something that people were actively really excited about. Coming up with ivory soap in the 1870s was like a huge deal that people were really into. So,
Well, and to think of New York and the streets of New York, or like, anyone who lives in a downtown.
hmm.
And like when I talk about the store that my friend is at, it's like that curated selection. Like the staff actually knows their boutique, they know their products. And there's something like trying to picture going back in time, you're in New York and you just jump from store to store. And it's like, okay, what are you looking for? And like you have a personal shopper basically who's like helping craft whatever you need. I
Mm.
was doing a little history and I was looking up CO Bigelow because I still remember the Bigelow pharmacy in Greenwich
Yeah.
Village.
Yeah.
And like that is something from turn of the century.
Hmm.
And like some of these stores still, like you just mentioned Dwayne Reed, like Dwayne Reed has a history. Like we don't think about it, but
Yeah.
these really large corporations all have a starting point. Like,
Yeah.
and a lot of them have a really old history. Um, so like what was something as you were writing your book, like you were learning that just fascinated you, like even about the industry itself?
It's a really good question. I think that I've already sort of some of my like most galvanizing little like moments are sort of maybe already I've already mentioned just because they drove the book so much in its early phase. Um, I think I was really interested in one other thing that really jumped out to me is the idea of the moment at which they was developed the concept of a fantasy scent, if that makes sense. So actually, this is kind of what we were talking about a few minutes ago in in making fun of some of the more corporate kind of like
Yeah.
over labeled scents, but the idea of it like a famous example is Chanel number 5. It doesn't smell like anything. It smells like Chanel number 5. It's not supposed to smell like roses or supposed to smell like lavender or like have a specific like the idea that had just never occurred to me because I hadn't thought deeply about this. The idea that that there was a time where someone had to have the idea for the first time like I am developing a scent whether it's for perfume or for a scented product of a different kind and I'm not trying to mimic anything in nature. I'm like this is its own art form and like that is it exists for its own sake. And that was like a moment where thinking about this and I put that like there's a scene where that kind of that conversation happens in the book between some of the characters that it just felt like a little like even as someone who doesn't like wear a lot of scents, like it's not like it kind of gave me shivers in that way of just like the idea that something can kind of take off into its own maybe at first like niche or cult art form in that way was really powerful to me.
Yeah, it reminds me of so my friend, her name is Janine, and she would actually show me they have all these essential oils in a blending bar.
Oh
And like
wow.
they'll pull out the strips of paper and be like, okay, we're gonna customize a scent. What kind of base fragrance
So
do you
cool.
like? What kind of, and they would like keep adding the layers. And it's that old school model, but it still is so fascinating. And I feel like I love that that still exists for them as a store because we have lost a lot of that
Yeah, that's really cool.
customization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
No,
awesome.
whenever you're out on Long Island, you have to
Yeah.
make
Although
a
I
trip.
think I would do a horrifically bad job. I think that that's part of what, and again, like this is something that's kind of dramatized in the book that there is kind of one character who does what I think I would do in that situation, which is just like too much, like put too much of everything, way too much, like whatever essential oils you've got, like 5 times too much and things that don't kind of go together, too many like kind of hero notes, nothing like that it's like willing to counterbalance. I think I would have too much of like a more is more attitude about how to do that kind of thing.
Well, you know, we'll put that to the test. Let me know when you start experimenting. But something that
Mhm.
I just love, like with thinking about Vivian thinking about her friend Oscar, and then
Mhm.
eventually Squire, who, you know, all of them are queer, but I'm not going to like spoil the plot for those who need to read your book, is
Mhm.
thinking about them as business partners, but also partners in love. Like I was thinking a
Mhm.
lot about your book, I feel does a really interesting meditation on like how people who go into business together, I feel like there's that like saying of like when you go into business together, sometimes you're closer as partners than even like their romantic spouses. And like there is
Mhm.
something about the way they're tied together. So what was it like trying to like create this dynamic between, you know, these three people trying to like, battle a little over who's going to be in charge of what operations in the business?
Yeah. I found it really interesting to have this, yeah, the situation where we've got people who have a business relationship and then also like a domestic romantic sexual relationship and like they're all with like kind of shifting dynamics in all on all sides there. I think I found it really interesting to kind of go to keep all of that spinning at the same time and kind of be just to remember that like the three of them all care to different extents about different parts of their relationship, if that makes sense. Like I feel like they're each of them, their investment in like the domestic romantic life and their investment in the company kind of shift, and a lot of the conflict tends to come from who in that love, that very weird I guess love triangle, cares more about which side of it at the same time. I'm trying to find a way to talk about it without giving away too
No,
much
no,
of
no,
the
no.
plot.
I know.
But yeah, like the idea of being like being collaborators in a professional context, which is also an artistic context, right? Because it would be different if they were like lawyers together or something. Like they are trying to like create to kind of develop and create these new products. And so like to have people who are kind of more creative versus have business acumen versus don't care at all and just want to go home, that kind of a dynamic kind of helped me find some tension, like a continuing tension for a book that takes place over decades, you know?
Well, and that makes sense. And I feel like something that must have been, well, what I'm assuming was exciting was also dealing with this aspect of, not only are they going into business together, but they're all holding an identity that they don't want to be made public, which is their queerness and their
Yeah.
actual sexuality. So like, did you go to any historical sources to see, okay, what was it like for those who were queer and who were in business during that time period?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I am not a historian, so I leaned very heavily on the work of expert professional queer historians who have gone before me. I always tell people great like books to start with that were very helpful to me in like early research for this were Gay New York, when Brooklyn was queer, Lesbian Love Story, and Wayward Lives and Beautiful Experiments, which were those are like that's like I feel like that's like a good starting place for
That's a good
anyone who's
canon.
like,
I mean,
yeah,
you have
exactly.
incredible authors there, right? So you have Hugh
Yeah,
Ryan
yeah.
is When Brooklyn Was Queer,
Mm-hmm.
George Chauncey's Gay New
Mm-hmm.
York,
Yeah.
Amelia Pasanza is
Yes.
Lesbian Love Story. And then the
Yeah.
fourth, I don't think I know the author. Who did
I
the
don't know
last
who.
one?
Let me see. I have it
We're
right
gonna
here.
find it in real time on the
Yeah,
bookshelf.
sorry. This is
I
not
love
good
it.
podcast. This is
No,
not
no,
good
it's fine.
podcast.
This is the part we edit, but we're good at Olivia.
Saidia Hartman. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but
Oh, Sadia Hartman. Yes,
yeah.
yes. She's a
Um,
professor at Columbia.
oh, amazing. Yeah. It's an incredible book for like if for anyone who hasn't read it, it's just like unreal. And so those like I
Cool.
felt those were good. Those were places that I started in thinking about like trying to get a baseline of like, because it can be hard to do for a lay person like me who doesn't know what I'm doing. When I go into an archive, I'm having fun, I'm exploring, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm, a fiction writer, not a historian. And queer history can be really elided in archives for one reason or another, like either on purpose by the people themselves as an act of self-protection, or as unfortunately we're seeing like more and more now, like kind of maliciously by other folks outside the community, who are misrepresenting or erasing something from a historical record. So it was really helpful for me to be able to start with the work of these like queer historians who had gone before. Um, but I think what was really inspiring to me was learning from reading this work and the archival sources that they were citing, that like then as now queer people of like all different types were doing whatever they wanted all over the place. So it kind of made me feel freer as a fiction writer to know that like whatever the individual characters were that I was going to be writing, they could have any personality or persuasion they wanted. They could like do whatever they want. There's not like one experience or one type of like community or life that was like accurate to to portray. So I don't know. That's kind of a roundabout answer to your question.
No, that's incredible. No, that
Mhm.
really is interesting. And I feel you've given now everyone four really excellent books. And I love when the to be read list continues. Um, so I guess like as we're, nearing the end, which I could just keep going. I love
hmm
talking all of these subjects with you, Olivia.
hmm
Is an element that I find must have been interesting is like you mentioned Ian Farster, and I don't want to let that
hmm
go because I'm a huge lover of Morris.
Yeah,
Um,
incredible.
right, and he writes that book posthumously, like it's published not writes
hmm
it, but it's published
Yeah,
posthumously.
yeah,
He's
yeah,
dead. It comes back, I think, in the 70s.
yeah. hmm
And I actually had an author on, this is like maybe 2 years ago now, who wrote the novel Alec, which is like the
Oh yeah,
follow.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
so you know
yeah,
that
yeah.
novel,
Yes,
William
yeah, yeah,
DeCanzio. There you go.
yeah, yeah.
And I love that like he like looks into Alex Scudder and that whole
hmm
plot line of just
Incredible.
developing it. And like you said, the kind of queerness like isn't new. Like this isn't like it didn't exist. And even in the
hmm
Gilded Age TV series, there is the queer character Oscar,
Yeah,
interestingly.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
The other Oscar.
those Oscars and their queerness in New York City. Um, but like even it's fascinating how like there's a time where sexuality is not part of the conversation. So like no
hmm
one's really like inquiring about his mannerisms dictating his
hmm
sexuality. It's kind of just like,
Sure.
oh, he's eccentric.
hmm
Or he's just into his style. And
hmm
what was it like even thinking about writing these characters at a time where sexuality isn't a language, like isn't a discourse. Like there is no one really trying to figure out if you're straight, you're gay, you're bisexual, and like working with that as a writer.
Yeah, it was really interesting and kind of empowering because it like to just think and kind of meditate on the ways that like labels and identities are always shifting, like how much they've shifted since the turn of the 20th century, but how much everything is continuing to shift as well. And the fact that like the people themselves have always existed and like that those two things can be true at the same time in this really fascinating and beautiful way. And yeah, in terms of dramatizing a story with like inner and outer conflict, it is like a really interesting thing to think about at this historical remove. Um, the way that like yeah, questions of identity really don't come up as much or not in the same way as maybe they come up now. To the extent that like for these characters in this time period, to the extent that that they are hiding themselves and what we would call their identities now, it's really more about behavior and acts. Like those are the things that you need to like make sure are kept secret, right? Like because those are like prosecutable under law, at least for Squire and Oscar. And like Vivian's in a unique situation, including legally, in the sense that there's much more like fuzzy understanding of what like female homosexuality is or like what it means or can you get in trouble for it. So those different levels of experience and threat inform their characters and the choices they're making and like maybe the level of fear they feel or don't feel as they move through the world. But yeah, to have this be for these characters, their relationships with each other are, and this is for these three particular people, like not a blanket statement, but their relationships are much more individual, like with one another as people, rather than um, identifying with any like one label or like global community that they would use to describe themselves. But I feel like I like at the same time I was like writing them in a sense of kindred, like kindred
Mhm.
spirit. Like I was feeling like I was like recognizing them. So yeah, it's fascinating to think about in general.
Yeah, no, this has been so wonderful. And, you know, can you tease like our, you're still basking in the glow of mutual interest in your novel, but like,
Mhm.
where's your creative mind? Because an artist, a writer never stops thinking. So like,
Yeah.
where has your mind been turning now when it comes to thinking of your next project?
I love it. That's a very generous question and very generously asked. So thank you. I enjoy that. I've been thinking this book is so tied to New York City. It's such a city book. Like the in every way, this is a book I feel like that could only really take place in New York City. And like I said, I grew up in this like very small rural town, and I think that by this point, at this like late stage of getting mutual interest out into the world, I've sort of been thinking more about drama of like all of these different characters with all these different lives might play out in a much more rural, like small town area. So that's what I've been working on more recently. That's like my kind of like new idea I'm batting around, is what a novel of community and psychological drama, what that looks like when it's played out in a much smaller, more isolated community.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm
Mhm.
excited about that, Olivia. So, where can everyone follow you on social media and how can they get their hands on mutual interest?
I am on Instagram at O Wolfgang Smith. That's probably the best place for folks to find me. And mutual interest should be anywhere at your local indie bookstore or library, wherever you may
Yes.
be.
Yes, I have a library, copy, but
Incredible.
also it's on Audible, it's on Libby, it's
Mhm.
everywhere. Mutual
Yeah.
interest is all the rage this summer. It's an excellent, it's an excellent beach read. It's an excellent pool read. It's an excellent everywhere. It doesn't matter. Or if you don't like going outside, it's an excellent agoraphobic read too. Hopefully I didn't
I love
offend the agoraphobic community, but you know, sometimes I'm like, I'd read so much if I didn't want to be outside in the sun.
Yeah.
Okay, so Olivia, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to have you back on.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Uh, Bye, Olivia.
Bye.
Okay. Good.